Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition, episode 65 of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. An important episode because today we are bringing you, as we see fit, the top 5 hitting absolutes in a professional type swing, courtesy of the expert himself, professional evaluator, successful business owner, my former coach, friend, and co-host, Jake Epstein.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Afternoon.
That's all you got? That's all you got for me? Just a good morning?
Good morning. That's all I got.
Wearing that big Oregon short shirt today?
I'm sick. Yeah, I'm going with the Ducks today in honor of my my old coach from Fullerton and where I grew up. I grew up in Eastern Oregon in Bend, which is still one of my favorite towns. And I know we have listeners in Bend, so I'm sure I'll hear from them. But shout out to Bend, great town. Just kind of. All the trades that went through yesterday, I'm thinking of the Brewers and their $94 million payroll, and they have to compete with the Dodgers and a $290 million payroll. And something just doesn't seem right with all of that. I don't know. There's got to be a better way to mandate trades, that the fact that these teams now, granted, they can pay the player and that's great, but they also have to have, prospects to get rid of. And I get that. But God, it was just blaring. I started to see tweets about, the fact that I think the Yankees are at 200 million and the Dodgers are at 290 million. Like the Dodgers, it's not even close. How do you compete in the NL West with that? How do you compete in the NL with that? I don't know. I don't know how to market share or to do a better job of leveling the playing field out there in Major League Baseball.
Well, you know what? It's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up, because I did see your tweet yesterday, and I do wonder, is a salary cap at this point something very similar to the NBA? And there's a lot of economics that have to be worked out. And if you try to implement a salary cap, I think that you are risking a possibility of a lockdown, if you will. Lockdown. Remember that, 2020. So basically, I think that you're risking a lot. But if you went the NBA style of a salary cap, would that actually work? Would that kind of help with what you're talking about in market share? Because the payroll for the Dodgers, 290 million, and they've basically built a super team at this point, and credit them too for
absolutely. Yeah, use what you got, right?
Credit them for building the farm system that they did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, 290 million. And then you think about teams like the Phillies, who right now are, I think, 3.5 back as we speak today in the National League East. And according to Fangraphs, their percentage wasn't very high. I think it was right around maybe 20 to 25% of making the postseason. They're a top 5 payroll. So there's something wrong here, I think, with the market share or lack thereof right now in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. And then absolutely a strike would come in. The players union isn't going to allow that.
Why'd I say lockdown? I said lockdown like an idiot.
Strike is a lockdown.
Okay. All right.
Strike is a lockdown. Yeah. I really don't. Maybe, you know what? But maybe the Brewers can spend 200 million. They just choose not to. Right. So, I'm not an expert.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. They're not a big market team, though.
It's not.
Yeah, you would know. Look, you would know better than me, obviously. Maybe
I'm not in those conversations, right? So I really don't. They choose to do things a little bit different. Their owner chooses to do things a little bit different. Maybe they do get a piece of, the Dodger fines. Anything over whatever their number is, 180 million or 200 million. They have to pay. Maybe that money, a lot of it goes to teams like the Brewers and the Reds, and the Royals, teams like that to make it a little bit easier. But regardless if that's the case, there has to be a number that just doesn't make, it's like, okay, that's enough.
Right.
Like we can't, look at that. They had Scherzer, Bauer. No, I don't even know what he's
I don't think he's coming back. Right.
But if you think about it,
by the way,
on paper, that's a team that already won a World Series.
Well, okay. Scherzer, Bueller, and Kershaw.
Right.
It's a fantasy team.
Yeah.
Trey Turner at second base, Corey Seager at short, Gavin Lux floating around somewhere.
And if he comes back, right? And if Bauer does come back, you're not going to – there's no way you can compete in a 5-game series against 3 or 4 number 1 pitchers.
Yeah. But again, they do have somewhat of the luxury tax.
Yes.
Going over that threshold is somewhat of a salary cap, but there's still a huge disparity. And
Huge.
I think it's starting to, I don't know, with the Dodgers building this type team, we're starting to reap what we sowed here, if you will,
Yeah.
and not having a
And,
proper
and maybe
salary
you
cap
have
or
bigger
floor at least.
stipulations. Like, you know what? You don't, if you hit your luxury tax, you don't have a first round draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't have a top 2. You can't start drafting until or it comes out of your international pool money.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever it is. There has to be repercussions besides money, because money obviously isn't doing it.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to fine us. Oh, okay. Here's another 20 million in fines.
Right. Just write that check and send it off. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you can deplete, if it depletes their minor league system and they don't have players now to trade, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big Dodger fan in the way that they have in the past had a lot of homegrown talent.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to figure out why their payroll is so high with all the homegrown talent that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people like, Bauer, picking up Bauer for a year or 2 years, bringing on Scherzer's salary. So, but when you look at most of their guys, Bueller and, Kershaw, Jensen, Seager, Lex, those are all guys that came through the system.
Yeah, Chris Taylor too, right?
Chris Taylor too. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of and Bellinger, right? I mean, these are guys that came. That's not easy to do. So I'm trying to figure out where that money is spent. It must be in bullpen.
I don't see. Maybe I'm very naive here, and I could be completely wrong, but I don't understand. To me, it seems like there are more penalties that have more of an impact if you go over your pool money after drafting and trying to sign your draft picks rather than actually spending over the luxury tax at the major league level. Because again, the Dodgers, the Yankees, a couple of other teams, maybe they don't care about writing that big check for the luxury tax fine. It doesn't,
No.
I mean, they say it matters, but ultimately in the end, I don't really think it does really do much of a dent for them. Oh, here's the check. Here, whatever. Ugh, we had to spend that money, whatever.
Right. It's a business expense.
Right, but there's all this hoopla around spending over your pool money when you're drafting.
I know.
To me, it just seems like there's an imbalance there that maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I'm looking at the Dodgers payroll. I forgot about Mookie Betts and David Price. So
right. I mean,
those guys together make $61 million, $61.5 million a year.
God almighty. How much are the Dodgers worth again?
Oh, I don't know. Not as much as the Cowboys, right?
No, I think you're right. I think the Cowboys.
The Cowboys they're still the most profitable sports team. In the United States, I'm sure there's a soccer club that's pretty good.
Let's move on here to our topic today: top 5 hitting absolutes. Paint a broad stroke. We're going to get into each absolute more in depth later on in the show. But for now, let's just go more global and discuss what are your top 5 hitting absolutes and why are they such?
Yeah, where my book is. My dad was just cleaning out his office, and he had his Ted Williams book, The Science of Hitting, and like the original one that he had, and it was signed by Ted. So it was really cool going through that. And then I was going through like all the notes and stuff. I'm trying to think. I think it might be right behind me here. Yeah.
I have read that. I know what book you're talking about. I've read that book.
No, I mean, this book, like everybody's had that book, right?
Yeah, I've read that book about 11 times, 12 times.
What it doesn't have is that in it, right? I mean, that's
Ted mine Williams. Does. Yeah, mine does too. No,
yeah, I'm sure yours does too. But it says, my friend who's getting to know more about hitting all the time.
Yeah.
And I can't read the other one. Best was Ted Williams. I mean, that's pretty cool. And then, there's just, all the notes that my dad started with. So it's cool. Like, this is where my understanding of hitting came from. Really was that exact book. So that was pretty cool to see the other day. So starting with the 3 absolutes that Williams talked about was 1, the hips have to lead the hands, which would be, my dad called it torque, 2 forces working in opposite directions. getting on plane with the pitch. Okay. The pitch, I think Williams in his book, he talked about 10 to 15 degrees down. I'm looking for that image here, but the ball's coming in 10 to 15 degrees. This was the graphic, right? Like everybody's kind of seen that graphic. But in reality now today, it's more like 4 to 8 degrees down the pitch is coming. So finding a way to get on plane and stay on plane with that pitch. And then the third one being your hands staying inside the ball, he put in there. And that has to do with really the first move of the hands, making sure that your barrel doesn't cast. That would really be, and it's the same as golf coming over the top. Casting in baseball does the same thing. It throws the barrel in front of your hands too early. Mm-hmm. And that will kink the bottom hand wrist. If I was a left-handed hitter coming through, I don't know how that comes through on video, but anyway, if your wrist does something kind of funky early, then that will cause your barrel to come around the ball. So those are the three things that, Williams came up with I don't know when he came up with them, probably not when he wrote the book, but probably sometime around 1950, he figured it out, maybe earlier than that. And, ones that I add to that would be, getting your foot down on time. What does that really mean?
Well, we'll discuss that because that one is talked about a lot on
You could have a lot of different things for that.
And we'll discuss that later. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nope. And then the last one would be proper sequencing, making sure the body works in the right order. And for any athlete, whether they're playing golf, whether they're a man or a woman, golfer or baseball, softball player, whether you're playing hockey, there's a sequence, whether you're throwing a ball, maybe even something like, since the Olympics are going on, the javelin or the shot put or the discus, any kind of activity where you're throwing something, energy has to build up properly with the body and then be released at the right time. So sequencing is very, very important. That's usually the biggest issue that I see with players. If their sequencing is off, it's very difficult to fix. Mm-hmm. It's one of the hardest things to fix when it comes to players. And some of that has to do with when your foot gets down on time or when your swing starts.
Well, right there, that mini segment was a little bit more visual. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast, for this episode, archived episodes, and of course, clips from those episodes as well. We'll get to the 5 absolutes more in depth later on in the show. I first want to talk about follow up with something from last week. We discussed how to hit a low pitch, and we kind of went in depth on it. So now I want to ask you and go the opposite way this week, the proper way to hit a high pitch, which I think, by the way, is a little bit easier. Maybe I'm wrong. Jose Altuve the other night hit a really high pitch that was like taller than him. He had great bat path, great hand path, and he hit in San Francisco, by the way. But how do you go about hitting a high pitch successfully and doing it at a pace that makes you successful?
Yeah, it's arguably more difficult. It depends on the player, but you have to practice it. It's like anything else. You have to practice it. You have to practice it the right way. So when I'm, for my online academy, when people are sending me videos and, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, I want you to do the high T drill that I have in there. And I want you to practice that. But I also want you to send me a video doing it so I can make sure you're doing it correctly, because it's not just about putting a ball in a tee, at your belly button and hitting it. Because what a lot of players do is they'll get their hands up like above their face in order to still drop the barrel downward to hit a ball at the belly button. And that's not what it has to be. So your barrel has to flat out. So you can't have your hands up here and still hit a high pitch like this. You have to be very level with your shoulders. You have to be very level with your spine. Can't lean in. You have to control the barrel early with your top hand. So there's a lot that goes into hitting a high pitch. For me, it's making sure your back elbow doesn't drop too soon. One of the things I worked with our players when I was coaching at Mizzou, if we were doing hit and runs, it was keep your back armpit open as long as you can. The longer that armpit stays open, the longer the barrel stays up. Mm-hmm. The quicker your back armpit closes, the the quicker your bat will flatten out. So if we're trying to, hit the top of the ball and make sure we're not popping up, instead of you just trying to chop or do something stupid, just keep that open a little bit and you'll stay above the ball pretty much every time. So, that's one of the big things that I work on. But it's all about bat vertical angle on high pitches, how far the barrel drops below your hands, and being able to control it, being able to play pepper. If you can't do it, and I have players that can't do it all the time, they can't do it, and I have to make them do it in 2 days.
Yeah.
And we'll play a version of pepper to get them to feel that move where they're swinging easy and trying to hit the ball in a certain spot and trying to bring out their athleticism. And then all of a sudden we'll start to dial it up a little bit. So high pitch, your posture is going to be more upright. You're not going to have as much inward tilt. Your barrel is going to stay up much longer. Your bat vertical angle is going to be in the, -15 to -20 range. And you won't sit down as much with your legs. That's kind of the adjustments that we see.
I like that cue you mentioned about keeping the front elbow separated from the armpit.
Back arm.
What did I say?
Front one. Yeah, back arm.
Back arm. My apologies. But I like that cue, and here's why. When you think about it, kids, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you think about it, when coaches with the fungos, when they hit ground balls, they're keeping that back arm further away and keeping it open, as you said, away from their body, correct? Is that a pretty good cue?
Fungos are great.
Yeah.
Fungos are a great way to learn how to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Hit fungos to the outfielders,
right?
Fungos to the infielders, and it's that whole adjustment that you have to make as a hitter. And I think, we could put that as an absolute. Be adjustable. Be able to control your swing. Mm-hmm. Don't just have one swing. For lack of a better example, I was talking to my dad recently. We went down and saw him last week. We talked about Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah.
And how big and physical he is. And he's kind of a guy that has one swing. That's why he misses pitches. He'll miss pitches by 3 feet.
Yeah.
He kind of just swings very similar. He doesn't have adjustability within his swing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why he gets, exploited sometimes. But when he's on and he's thinking correctly, then he hits the ball really well. But we have to be adjustable. Altuve would probably be the most adjustable swing in baseball that I can think of. He can go down and hit a low pitch. He can hit a high pitch. I think Vlad Guerrero has that, but not as free as Altuve does. Altuve looks like a wiffle ball player sometimes.
And why is that? Why? Well, how come? Is it because the size difference? Is it something physical? Well, what is it? Or is it something we just don't really know? And maybe we have to get our research and development team on it.
Yeah, we'll get our R&D. It's likely the way that Altuve grew up playing when he was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old would be my guess. It could be how big he is.
Yeah,
he's got to get after it and put everything into it, and he's got to come off the ground on a high pitch and lay down on a low pitch. Maybe that was just how he came up. Vlad hits both of those because mechanically he's just terrific.
Because I would think that Altuve and Guerrero, despite having a size difference, and there certainly is one, they have the same type swing plane and they have the same type bat path and hand path. It's short and it's ideal. Right. Yeah. They're both very similar. No.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think Altuve has actually a little bit more barrel drop, I would say, than Vlad does.
Mm-hmm.
But their extension, the way their body works, Altuve is just more violent with his legs because he has to be at his size. But they're both terrific hitters and they both cover the whole strike zone. Yeah. And that's not common in today's age. It's getting more common though,
which is a good sign. Why is it getting more common?
What's that? Well, because of the high pitch. Guys are just focusing more on getting on top of high pitches, which we've traced back in these podcasts. The history of hitting, right? But
history or hitting history book.
Hitting history, part 1. So it's you look at players like Mel Ott, right? And they're Ty Cobb. They're all high ball hitters, right? Because the catcher didn't go into a complete squat. You know what I mean? All the pitches were up, from the belt to the chest, and that's the way they were. So you saw their back leg come off the ground more. And then as time went on, all of a sudden, Bob Gibson comes in the league, and Denny McClain and guys that were throwing really, downhill. Then all of a sudden they started throwing lower, and hitters had to adjust. And now it's going to come back up. Pitches have been thrown up for a couple of years now, and now hitters will have to make the adjustment. And then all of a sudden the pitchers will start to, sink balls again. So it's just the evolution of the game. Everybody trying to stay one step ahead. Yeah. And guess what? History repeats itself, and if we're smart as baseball people, then we can see that and make sure that we train our players to hit accordingly.
Speaking of history, and you're on vacation next week, but the week after that, I think the Field of Dreams game will be happening, and I'm going to get your opinion on the Field of Dreams game in a couple of weeks between the Yankees and the White Sox. Looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it does.
I like what they did with it. Yeah. I want to make a point about Henry Davis really quickly. I did watch him on video this week. I think his body type and just his overall in general play, it reminds me of Joey Bart.
Yeah.
Who is just tremendous. And he's kind of a back leg type hitter, Joey Bart, kind of. He really is. But he has a good swing plane like Henry Davis. And I just want to remind all players out there that Henry Davis, and I have no issues, I take no comeuppance with Baseball America, MLB Pipeline. I think their rankings are great. I know a lot of people in Baseball America, J.J. Cooper being one, does an excellent job. And he's excellent talent evaluator. But I just want to remind everybody that Henry Davis was not ranked in the top 100. Maybe I'm wrong. In the top 100 prospects coming into the year.
Wow.
And he went number 1 overall. So players, if you're listening, I know we have college players that listen. Don't worry about rankings. Worry about what you can control. That's exactly what I got from watching Henry Davis on film. He does what he does, controls what he can control. He has a great swing plane. He's a gamer, and he went number 1 overall. What do you think of his swing, by the way?
I love his swing. So he was, the fact that he, wasn't ranked. I didn't know that. I don't follow that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it will sway my judgment on players.
Yeah.
If I read the hype. So my job is to evaluate the swings and to look for strengths and weaknesses within that swing. Yeah. And so I try to just use, what I'm paid for, right? Which is my brain, in looking at those things. So he was ranked really high on my stuff. He had one little funny thing with his foot, doesn't affect the swing. So I ranked him very, very high. He also signed for almost $2 million less than slot money. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with the fact that him going number 1.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Pirates wanted a catcher. The fact that he made a pre-draft deal to save the Pirates $2 million played a huge role in that. Yeah. Otherwise, he probably would not have been a 1-1. He may have been a top 10 pick, but I'm not sure he would have been a 1-1.
I do think he's going to be in the big leagues in 2 years, though. I think the talent is there. He reminds me a lot. I know, Joe, I hate making comps from one minor leaguer to another, but he reminds me so much of Joey Bart, and Joey Bart's going to be a good major leaguer, good big.
I think so too. Yeah, Bart was phenomenal when I got his draft report stuff.
Question for you: I'm reading some of these reports from MLB Pipeline of prospects that went over to teams that traded away their big time talent. What do you think about? I'm putting you on the spot here, so sorry if I apologize for that already. But what do you think about people, organizations who use, say, a 55 rather than just rounding up, going to a 60? See, I've never been maybe I'm just completely ignorant here, but I've never been a big component of using, say, a 55 instead of a 60 or a 50. I mean, it's one or the other. I mean, what's a 55 tell you? That he has half power, the player? Half game power is 55? Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, You can make the argument, say, well, he's 55 because he has power just to left center and a little bit to center. Okay, that's fair. But wouldn't that be a 60 power then when you think about it? Because a 70 power really is what? Left field line to right center. And then, of course, an 80 power is line to line power, which is very rare. Yeah. I just don't again, I'm not against it. I just don't see the use. I think that when you go half pregnant like that, it's kind of a crutch. saying, well,
that's what
his hit tool is a 55. Well, how's it a 55? Is it a 50 or a 60?
Yeah,
right? Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not sure.
I'm not against it, but
it could be better. It could be worse. I'm not sure.
Right.
It all depends on the organization, right? If the organization has a number, okay, right. 55 means something, right? Then I think it could be useful. Mm-hmm. I think for a blanket company like that, baseball, that they probably shouldn't do that. But I think if it's an internal scouting organization and if there's a half grade in there, then that means something within that organization, I think it could be useful. But otherwise, I'm probably with you on that one.
All right. Yeah. Sorry to get off topic. But again, I don't think major league teams should use the half numbers because, again, you should be precise. Why? Because you have analytics departments that are precise and research and development departments that are precise. That's what analytics exists for, to be more precise.
Yeah.
Right. So why not have it in scouting as well? But I'm sure major league teams, maybe most teams probably echo what I'm saying. I read some of these reports and I see 45 and I see 55 and then 65 and it doesn't make sense to me. Again, it's just, I don't want to say lazy, but it's a crutch.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our show. Apple, Google, Spotify, and of course our YouTube page, The Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. New episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. And follow us on social media at Jim Terra, at Epstein Hitting, and email us at jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. We'll get to our listener questions at the end of the show. Let's talk about our hitting absolutes. I wrote them all down. Get into our main topic here. Our top 5 hitting absolutes. We'll start with staying on plane, not discussed enough. Staying on plane. Let's dive into that one. That's number 1. Now, is that number 1? The ones you mentioned here, staying on plane, creating separation, torque, staying inside the ball, proper sequencing, foot down on time. Is that real? Is that the order of importance, or no, they're not.
No, they're not. I think staying on plane is probably the number 1 importance.
Okay. So let's dive into
you can say getting your foot down on time, but if you're on plane, you're going to find barrels. If you find barrels, you're going to get hits. Mm-hmm. If you get hits, you're going to keep playing.
Yeah.
If you have really good power and sequencing and get your foot down on time and create a lot of torque, but you don't find a lot of barrels, then no one's going to know if you're any good because you're hitting 150. Yeah. So, yes. And staying on plane, it's, when are you on plane? I think everybody talks about, being on plane, right? But everyone has a different idea of when that is. A lot of I don't know what they call it. Is it called a high level pattern? Is that what HLP stands for? High level player, I have
no idea what you're talking about.
Teacher man, Richard stuff, which, I see, like, I'm not debunking anyone out there, meaning get the barrel moving fast right away. I think that's his big thing, which, I don't think there's a problem with doing that, but how we do it and the risk involved in that, that is where stuff is, that's where players get into trouble, I guess. I don't think what he talks about is wrong at all. Like, I feel like, yes, the barrel moves that way, but I feel like the way that different people teach it causes problems, just with what I see. So anywho, getting back to, being on plane is, I'm a guy that, on most pitches, did you do your little study the other day? I almost I was looking at highlights and it was like every ball that was hit hard was between the top of the thighs and the belt. Mm-hmm. Did you do your thing? You were going to talk about, what's easier to hit, the low pitch or the pitch that's elevated a little bit. So, I'm a guy that on a pitch that's at the thighs, from the thighs to the belly button, you need to get on plane right before your front knee. And you need to stay on plane all the way to your front toes. And if you can do that, you can be very successful. If you get on plane deeper than that, like say at your back hip, there's no physical way. I've never seen anybody get on plane from their back hip and then stay on plane all the way to their front toes. And when I've tested players, and not 10-year-olds, but when I've tested, Division I college players and professional players, their maximum bat speed is at their front toes. So when people talk about, you got to get the barrel moving fast early so you can hit the ball deep, it doesn't matter, because when you hit the ball deep, it's still 3 to 5 miles an hour less than what it is at the front toes. It's just the way it is. Like, that's the way it is. So, getting a player to be able to be on plane at their front toes is totally crucial to maximize their ability. So anyway, that's me and on plane. For sure.
I did before we go on to the next one, I did do the study. I picked a random game. I'm not going to say which one. And I only did slugging percentage all the time I had this week. Ready for this? The slugging percentage on low balls that were hit.
Say again, please.
The slugging percentage. Well, you know what? Maybe if you stop drinking coffee during the show, then we can get something done here.
Well, I put myself to sleep. That's the
problem. I put you to sleep. You finally admitted it.
Hey, why do you have coffee too?
After 64 and a half episodes, you finally admit my voice put you to sleep. I'm sure the audience is giving you a standing ovation.
It's never good when people listen to our podcast when they're in bed. That's never.
I know. We're better
on the Calm app now.
I was just going to say we're better than the Calm meditation app. This will put you right into a deep sleep, this show. So I did do a study for one game. I didn't do batting average. I only did slugging. That's all the time I had. I'm not going to say which game it was, but the slugging percentage against low balls that were hit was 602. So to your point, also too, we have, that brings up another point as well. At the end of the season, on one of the shows, maybe in like November, we're going to rank the top 5 hitting free agents. Maybe we'll do like an episode. I don't know. We're going to rank the top 5 hitting free agents. And I'm going to have a hitting data project I'm working on right now. And it has to do with the high and low ball that I'm going to present on this show in November, for the record.
That'll be fun because Chris Bryant may be one of those players. That'd be a fun one.
I think he will be
unless he has a deal in place.
Well, he might be a top 5. Well, in November, not in November. I don't think he'll have a deal. Maybe. Well, if the Giants extend him, I don't think they will.
They were talking about it with the trade. We'll see.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one here. Our top 5 hitting absolutes. Creating, again, this is in no particular order. Creating separation, torque. That may be number 1 or number 2, though.
Sure. So, but then you have a guy like Vlad Guerrero, doesn't have a ton of it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have a ton of separate. Mookie Betts has a ton. We saw it in the Jonathan India breakdown last week. He has a ton of torque. Some guys have a ton, some guys don't. But you have to have it because it helps with sequencing. And it helps with adjusting, and it helps with keeping your hands back so you don't have one swing. You can make adjustments to an 86-mile-an-hour slider when you're looking for a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. Okay, so that's why that's important. Plus, it activates the body, so you have a little bit more snap or energy release in the swing. So torque separation of torsos. At heel plant, your front shoulder's got to be down to create torque. So that's when people say, hey, keep your front shoulder down, kind of an important thing, even though it's an old school movement. That's what they're talking about, making sure your upper body doesn't go too soon before your legs go. So, we look at torque at heel plant, how much hip rotation are we getting? Are they starting to release? And did we resist that release by keeping our shoulders and torso back, facing the catcher? So torque is really important for adjustments, power, and timing.
And also, too, with torque, we talked about this with Sal Frelick.
Yeah.
With torque, keeping that front shoulder low in the load, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Or keeping it down, sorry. Not low.
Low, yeah, both low and down.
Staying inside the ball, number 3.
Mm-hmm. So it has to do, our hands are always inside the ball. Like nobody's hands have ever gone out. If the ball is released and you drew a straight line from ball to glove and you made a fence there, nobody's hands ever goes outside the ball. The ball's coming at the elbow, the hands never like that. That's not a thing. But how the barrel starts to stay inside the hands when we rotate. I covered a lot of this in my coaching certification because it doesn't make much sense when people say stay inside the ball. People think, well, do I just hit the inside of the ball? Well, that's one way of thinking about it, but we don't always want to hit everything to right field too. So, staying inside the ball typically means that our wrist is good. Our lead wrist is good. We're not casting. So if we get back here and we do this and start to cast, that will typically mean that when we get to contact, the barrel will always be in front of the hands. And if that's the case, we'll pull everything and we're not staying inside the ball. So staying inside the ball essentially means that we're not casting, we're creating lag which is good, right? We're creating lag and whip in the swing. Without that, if we cast early, we lose a ton of power, bat speed, and barrel control.
All right, proper sequencing.
And that just typically means that, our body follows the right order. Okay. So, the feet have to initiate contact first. So if I see a player swinging and all of a sudden they're starting to drop their back elbow, or they're starting to, lose their back hand before their front foot lands and before their front hip opens or starts to open, they're out of sequence. So, pretend you're throwing a baseball and your arm comes forward, or a softball, your arm comes forward before your front foot lands. That would be out of sequence. If that happens, we lose any kind of kinetic energy. Like, we're going to have hardly any bat speed, and we're also going to have detrimental, we're going to have bat drag, and we're going to have casting, and we're going to lose our barrel because our hands are trying to go before our body turns.
One more thing. Let me ask you about proper sequencing. Question I have. In the load, the hips initiate the swing, right? In the load?
No, in the swing they do.
Okay. So
like once we land,
when the hips are loading, when the hips are loading into that back pocket, as they say, they're kind of, and then the leg, or am I just confusing everybody?
No, you're right. I don't gauge, and whether this is right or wrong, my dad, this was just, and Ted Williams, there's a difference between style and technique. And technique,
we talked about that.
Technique for me starts at heel plant. So how a player loads, big leg kick, no leg kick, glide, a lot of weight going into the back leg, a lot of hand action, hitch, none of that, that to me is, I don't want it to take away from the technique, but whatever's built in for that player, like I want to see come out how they load. So when I talk about more the absolutes, it would be like right around front toe touching, ball of the front foot touching after the stride and the load.
Okay.
But when you cock your front hip in, absolutely, that would be one of the first things to load. And some people do that with a hand movement too. They'll move their hands as their front hip closes. But that really doesn't have to do with sequencing for me. Sequencing starts at heel plant.
Okay.
It'd be like a golfer. It starts at the top of their swing versus how they take the club back.
And these absolutes are also for softball swings too, for the record, not just baseball. And finally, this is going to be a controversial one. Yeah. And when we say it, we don't mean it in the literal way or the sense that people may be thinking. Front foot down on time. We got to really break that one down, because right away people are, no, that's not, no.
Yeah. What's on time? What is on time? Does it mean we start? It doesn't matter when we start. It matters when we get that foot down. You can start when the pitcher is just moving, and that would be a really slow rhythm to get your foot down on time. So the key for me is, can you, I don't want the foot down early, because a lot of times we won't really get it all the way down. We'll just kind of hang out there and wobble around on our front toe and then drop. So front foot down typically needs to be, like 15 feet, if we're taking a number, 15 feet, with the ball 15 feet from home plate. That's where you have to be. If you get your front foot down late, what happens is you start your upper body. So I'm reading the pitch. Here comes the pitch. So this is, maybe 80% of players under 12. This is an issue. Okay. So here's the pitch. The pitcher lets go of the ball. Then I lift my foot. And then I'm reading the ball. And then I'm like, oh, crud. I got to get my barrel to the ball, but my foot's in the air. So they start doing something with their hands, but because their foot hasn't landed yet, they're not rotating. And so what happens is the hands just drop. Okay. They drop way down low, and it causes huge problems. So how do we fix that? We have to get that player to start moving sooner. So a lot of times getting your foot down means you got to lift it up sooner. It has nothing to do with getting your foot down. It has to do with starting the process of the stride much sooner. So having a player stride, but not so early that you drop your foot and it just hangs out there. Okay. Cause then we lose all momentum. So, it's a dance, right? It's a rhythm, everything kind of going together and making sure that, we fire on time. So that's why we spent at the lab in Texas, we use machines that have a long feeder, because as soon as that ball hits the feeder, the feeder's like this long, right? It's, I don't know, maybe 4 feet. we tell the player to start striding.
Mhm.
So that by the time the ball hits the wheels, they're at the top of their stride. And that's the key. If you can get a player at the top of their stride, where all they got to go is forward and down with their stride, when the ball's released, then you have a chance of getting your foot down on time and having proper sequencing. But of course, then you got to keep your hands back. You got to make sure you create torque as you're getting your foot down.
Funny story about
hard.
that.
I don't think anyone should play this game.
When I was hitting back in the fall at Stance Doctor, Steve from Stance Doctor, I was struggling with that. He has the same type machine with the long,
and
I was struggling with that. My timing was all off. I wasn't getting my front foot down, kids.
Yeah. I mean, and we stand there behind every player, especially when it's their first 3 classes or something, they've been there.
Yeah.
We're standing there like in their ear, get ready, like, because that's the biggest issue. And I'll tell you, once they get that off the machine, all of a sudden that's when we see the biggest gains in games. And it really doesn't have anything to do with us changing mechanics we're not changing mechanics in a couple of weeks, right? But their timing getting better in a couple of weeks all of a sudden leads to better results on the field, which is pretty cool for players.
I was just trying not to embarrass myself in front of pro guys.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
And Steve from Stance Doctor.
Yeah. Steve's awesome. You know who's also good down there? I'll give a shout out. Kevin McMahon is so good down there in Texas.
Yeah.
Caleb Roberts.
Wait a second. He's not down there. You say down there like he's in Florida, but you said down there in Texas.
No, he's in Florida.
You said he's from Texas. You just said Texas.
I did. I said I want to give a shout out to Kevin McMahon down there.
Down there in Texas.
Down there in Florida. So Kevin's been a long time.
Is he in Tampa? Is he in Tampa Bay?
He's not in Tampa Bay. He's in the I'm just Parkland, like Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, all right.
Boca. Okay. I mean, we'll call that South Florida, right? So he's in that area, but he worked with Caleb Roberts, who was was he a 5th, 6th, 7th? I don't know, rounder out of UNC. It was on our tweets.
Yeah.
And I worked with his grandfather. Was a great man. He's Pat. I mean, really like the mayor of Florida. He was just a wonderful human. But he went through certification, and then I did camps for them. They were called the Florida Pokers when Caleb was little. But Kevin was the one that really took him through high school. So I want to give a shout out to him. He should be really proud because Caleb made himself some money.
Do you think he listens to the show, Kevin?
I think so. Yeah,
Kevin and Caleb should be listening to the show.
Yeah, they should. Good people. Florida's the best.
Yeah, I know. It is, isn't it? All right, final point here. Episode 65. Top 5 hitting absolutes. Why are the 5 we just talked about in depth so important?
Because I said they were.
All right. Want to get to our listener questions now? That's when we fade to black when you go up to the camera like that.
Just cut it.
End of the show.
Why are they so important? Because if you don't have one, you can't play at a really high level.
Yeah.
If you're missing one of those, you're going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things that's really important too is not drifting after heel plant. Usually if your sequencing is good, but making sure that you rotate behind the ball. Every great player, and with absolutes, it's what do the great players do, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at. What does Altuve, who's 5'8", do that Judge does? What does Roger Maris? What did Roger Maris do that the young Yastrzemski does? Now, like what are those? Because everybody does a lot of things differently. But what do the great players really do? And a lot of them might lose their barrel early, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not on plane as much. Somebody like Judge, and I think that's why if you go back to really 3 absolutes, which is what Williams talked about, hips lead the hands, right? Creating torque, staying on plane, and then staying inside the ball, making sure that we create lag and whip. Yeah. That is for sure. Like that plays whether you're little or big. But I try to use those 5 absolutes that we talked about today with all my players, because I don't know how big all my players are going to be. I don't know how physical. I'm not working with every organization's top 10 prospects, position player prospects. I'm working with some of those guys, and then I'm working with, a 10-year-old that is trying to make a travel team. Right. So how do we do that? How do we work with those different players? Well, if I'm building a 10-year-old, I don't know where he's going to be. I don't know where he's going to. We'll take Caleb Roberts, right? He was probably 10 when I first met him. I don't know where he's going to be.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? I'm going to kind of make sure that he keeps his front shoulder down. I'm going to make sure that his hands stay back when his front heel plants. And I'm most definitely going to make sure that he's on plane for a long time, because if he is at 10, he's going to have success as he continues to grow into his body.
Yeah.
And that's why being on plane is number one for me and my players. And that's why I spend so much time with my young players on making sure they're on plane.
Yeah. Let's get to our listener questions. This first one comes to us from loyal listener JJ, sent to us via jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. JJ writes, Jim and Jake, before you go on vacation, meaning you, great analysis of Jonathan India. You discussed his bent front knee, created in his stride and sink that helps him get on plane with low pitches. A younger Pujols did that very well. A hitter that doesn't do what India does would likely make up for that move with a steeper negative vertical bat angle. Would that be correct? Thanks for taking my questions. Your podcast is the best hitting podcast out there. And is there anyone better than Jake? And that is from JJ. And he writes, as always, Shawnee against the world.
I love that.
Yeah. He does too. He loves that too.
And by against the world, he's meaning you.
That's okay.
He's meaning you. Yes, absolutely.
Cherokee against the world. My sister went to Cherokee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't sink into your legs as much, you have to do it with your hands, which is more risky, and there's more room for error because our hands are weaker, than our glutes and quads and core. So yes, you would have to have a much steeper bat vertical angle to get the barrel down. And so when you have that adjustability, so say on a low pitch, I had a guy when I was coaching in college, he had not a good bat vertical angle, right? He'd be in like the negative 40s with his bat vertical angle. So he could hit a pitch like at his shins, but if you threw him a mistake at his belt, he couldn't hit it. Like he couldn't flatten that. He didn't have the ability to do that. So when you go from say negative 40 on a really low pitch, and then you got to be at negative 15 on a high pitch, that range is very difficult. So you can think, well, if I could be maybe instead of negative 15 to negative 40, I can be like, negative 20 to negative 30, but use my legs a little bit more. Or, some guys will just drop their hands more. So they won't drop their barrel as much, but their hands will be lower because they're strong and they can control the barrel that way. That's beneficial as well. So, but off the top, absolutely. Like if you don't use your legs and you're trying to get a low, meaning you don't sink and you don't get wide enough and you're trying to get to a pitch down, you got to drop the barrel a lot for sure. 100%.
Really quick. Before we get to the next question, what is an ideal vertical bat angle?
I'd shoot for my players because, a lot of the ones that I see, they drop I just had a college girl out who's a really good player I've worked with for a long time. Ansley Finch, she goes to Troy, and they came out to Denver for a couple of days. And so we were working on hers, trying to get hers into that negative 25 range. Mm-hmm. So, I try to get players, in that negative 20 to negative 30 range with the bat vertical angle.
Yeah.
And then if we have to go down more than that on low pitches, we will. But the more that barrel drops, the more the angle of that barrel drops, the more side spin we get on the balls instead of backspin, which takes away distance. Mm-hmm. And the more the bat vertical angle changes, the harder it is to hit balls out in front without rolling over the top outside of them. So I try to limit that as much as I can. I usually don't have players that have a hard time dropping the barrel. Like that's
this is for a visual for YouTube, so I hope everybody subscribed to the Lab Epstein.
Yeah, you got to watch this on
YouTube page. Show us with your hand that you're doing right there, your right hand. Show us what would be a 20 to 20, if you can, 20 to 25 bat.
So 20 to 25.
No, the other hand. Right, okay, that hand's fine.
Well, what hand is this? This is my right hand hitter.
If you're right-handed.
Is this better? This is my right hand.
Well, I'm a left-handed
This is a left-hand hitter. Left-hand. Hi, this is my head. Okay, so that would be 0. That would be like negative 40. Okay, that would be negative 90, just so everybody knows. 0, negative 90. So I like to be in that 20 to 25 range there.
All right.
because the ball usually when it comes out of the hand, I mean, if you want to get scientific on this, especially in baseball, softball's a little bit different, especially in baseball, that ball's axis is tilted a little bit.
Yeah.
The ball's not coming in like perfect force spin. So it's got a little bit of sink coming in. So a little bit of barrel, vertical barrel drop is good. But I mean, you can't do it. Like you can't be zero.
Yeah. By the way, kids, see what Ep just said right there with the wrist angle of the pitch coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Quick little pitching lesson that I learned a while back. I'll credit Mark Riggins for this one. If you don't know who Mark Riggins is, you probably do. Google him. Your dad probably does too.
Wasn't he a running back for the Redskins in the 80s?
No,
that was John.
So the wrist, it has to be at a certain angle. And if it tilts one way, the wrong way, or the other, then when you're trying to cut the baseball, if you throw, say, a sinker or two-seam fastball or a breaking ball, it's not going to have the same spin axis.
There you go.
All you pitching gurus out there can email us at JimboPodcast21 and tell me how wrong I am. I'm probably not wrong, though. Let's go on to
I gave out. Somebody wrote me a question, and they said, "Oh, I can send it to Jim."
Well, we're going to get to that now.
And then I had to be like, "Oh my gosh, what is the podcast email?"
You still like 65 episodes in. You still don't.
No, but I always say it on the air, but I've never had to type it out before, and then I couldn't remember. Was it 21? It was 21.
This comes to us from Tom. This is the gentleman who sent you that email. Sent to us via jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Tom writes, "Hi, guys. Trying to mix in some batting practice with Matthew. Matthew is his son, who happens to be an online. I don't know if he's online. Maybe is he a student in person?
So good, too. This kid he's super young. We should actually do a video of him. That kid's friggin' awesome. Like how far he's come.
Good.
I think he's 8 or something.
His father writes, Tom, my arm is trash, so I barely can give him something hittable from one bucket of balls. After that bucket, dear Lord, my arm is dead. Throwing off my knees is even goofier, but it's super hard for someone with poor accuracy to throw to these little guys. LOL. By the way, funny story with LOL. When my sister used that in a text once a while back, when she was a teenager with my dad thought it meant lots of laughs. So, and he said that in front of her friends and embarrassed her. What do you recommend for your dads that have difficulty throwing BP? Our machine's a bad idea. Hack Attack isn't cheap, which is true, but he's 7, so it'll get some use.
7.
Or is an L screen from 15 feet better than a machine? Is underhand worse than throwing all over the place overhand? Essentially, what does Jake recommend for batting practice when the thrower just can't provide solid, consistent pitching? What is your opinion on front toss, pitching machine, throwing underhand/overhand, etc.? Love the podcast, and that is from Tom Johnson. Tom, great email. Thank you for writing in for the first time. We do appreciate that.
Yeah, Tom's right. And there's, it's throwing accuracy. We take it for granted because I grew up playing, and I played for, 20 years. How old was I? 5 to 25, something like that, 4 to 20. So, there's a lot of reps. And then I coached, right? So I had to do that too. So, you never know how hard, you have a lot of dads that maybe played soccer, right? Or maybe didn't play at all. And so it's a hard move. So underhand flips by far is the best for dads with young kids, because number one, it's not intimidating to the kid where you're going to hit them. Number two, it's accurate. And most dads play cornhole, with a Coors Light or a Yingling. Mm-hmm. That was for you, buddy. That was for Mike Campo, my old roommate, who's probably not listening. I don't know what he does now, but he was a Penn State guy. Like you, reminds me of you. Anyway, I digress. So
is that a good thing or bad thing?
Good thing. Italian from
I don't really
Pennsylvania. I mean, come on. So anyway, we can throw front toss, and so get behind a screen, mm-hmm. From I think I told him about 12 feet away is usually pretty good, and just throw underhand. One of the other issues, this is a certification topic that we cover every time. What's the best way to throw to your kid in certification? A lot of times when kids are young, and Matthew's 7, I thought he was older than that. Wait till you see this swing. I should send it to you so you can post it somewhere. We'll ask Tom's permission on that. But, like for instance, me, I'm 6'5". If I was throwing to a kid that's, 3'8", or I don't know, 4'8", and I'm not at 60 feet or 54 feet, that ball's going to come down like 20. How are you get on plane with that? Right now, we're going to create a lot of issues. So at least when you do underhand flips, the ball kind of goes up, it reaches a peak, and then it comes down. And when it comes down a little bit less. Mm-hmm. Okay. So one of the reasons kids swing up a lot at a young age is because the ball's lobbed to them. Mm-hmm. And so they have to. So you have to be very careful to monitor swing plane with the pitch coming in. So 12 feet, sitting on a chair or a bucket with an L screen, or you can throw squishy balls or wiffle balls. And just throw strikes. That's the number one thing when you're working with your kids. It doesn't matter where you are, throw a ball in the strike zone so that they can hit it.
All right, and our final listener question, it's more of an interaction, comes to us from Rory, sent to us via jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Rory writes, simply, keep up the great work on the podcast. Just a dad of an 11 and 13-year-old who listens and learns. Appreciate the time you and Jake put in each week. Thanks. And that's from Rory Hoke. Well, Rory, we do appreciate doing this every single week. We hope that you are learning and listening and enjoying and being entertained by our shenanigans.
There were some shenanigans this week for sure.
There's a lot of podcasts out there, a lot of sports-based podcasts.
There's a ton
of them. A lot of them are very boring because they talk about their strengths, which they're knowledgeable in, but they don't understand how to actually decipher it and make it entertaining and broadcast it. And we do try to do all of that, decipher, entertain, broadcast, while doing a little bit of teaching every single week. So thank you, Rory. We do appreciate that. And if anybody wants to write in and compliment us, we like compliments, and send us your questions to jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. What is it? What is it? One more time.
I thought you were setting me up. You already said it.
Oh, well, you got to say it again.
jimbopodcast21
at
gmail.com.
Yeah. See, you're very choppy. It's got to come out smooth.
I'm not a professional, Jim. No. You're the professional.
So next week, Ep's on vacation. So we are going to be joined by a special guest co-host, Dominic Robinson of 3D Sport Performance. He's a good friend of Ep's, and we're going to discuss a lot of things next week. But Dominic will be joining us on the show as a guest co-host. We've got a bunch of mechanical breakdown series. We're doing Shohei Ohtani in August, Bailey Hemphill in August as well. And I also came up with an idea that I didn't discuss with Ep prior to the show, but I'm going to discuss it now. So here we go. I'm going to take a video of my swing right now, current day. And we're going to do a mechanical breakdown series on yours truly. You think I'm not willing to embarrass myself? Oh, kids. Whatever is good.
I think people will have a lot of respect when they see your swing and be like, this isn't just a voice. This isn't just a pretty face.
That's right. Who's the one listener who wrote in and said, who's your co-host? He's the guy who talks a lot of the certification or something. I've never been to the certification.
Yeah, I'm wondering who that was.
That was like a year ago. That was a while ago.
Yeah. We have guys that talk quite a bit.
Yeah, not me. I'm not there.
No, not there. Should be though.
I always shut my mouth and open my ears. That's what I do.
And make sure you listen to the podcast with Dominic, because especially if you're in the travel ball world, because he knows so much more than I do on teams and how they're run and how showcases are run. Maybe send in your questions now to jimbopodcast21@gmail.com about that. If you have travel ball questions, how to showcase. So, Dominic has wonderful genes. He played at Florida State, baseball and football. Okay. So his son is an amazing athlete. He's big and he's athletic. He might be one of the top football players, wide receivers in the state of Arizona. I think he's one of the top outfielders in the state of Arizona. So he's kind of on that path and Dominic has a bunch of teams into his organization. So definitely I'm going to listen to it because I need to, learn more about how all that stuff works as well. But if you do have questions specifically towards travel ball organization showcases, that would be a wonderful person to ask.
Yes. Yeah. I'm excited to get my swing broken down too, by the way. Now I'm really excited about it.
Me too. I'm just,
Tear me apart.
I'm scared to see what I did to you because I wasn't as good then as I am now. Sorry to ruin your career.
Yeah, that's all right. I think I did enough of that myself. I think I don't know. I hope I don't have a bar arm problem still.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I do. I do too. Yeah, I mean,
we will do it. Well, I don't know. We can do that maybe in August or September. Maybe we can do it in like September when I take the video when it's less hot in Florida. Because right now it's like 110 degrees it's our winter, as they call it in Tampa Bay or in Florida.
Not bad.
What's coming up at the lab? What can people and fathers of kids of like Tom and his son Matthew expect at the lab, besides, of course, the hitting certification that's coming up in the fall? But right now at the lab, what's coming up? What do we have on tap?
Fall training. So kind of transitioning from the shoulder season of the summer into the fall, which we like because it's a little bit more instructional. We can work on issues maybe that we saw. So we like to figure out our players, like, what did you do well this summer and what did you not do well? What do we need to improve on? Then we can attack that and create a fall season. So a lot of fall training memberships. We probably still have, I mean, we're pretty darn busy down there, but I'm sure there's still 10 or 12 memberships that are available, meaning slots during our weekly training. And then we'll have some weekend events as well. So make sure you visit thelabbcs.com.
All right. So Dominic Robinson will be joining us next week. Ep's on vacation. He'll be back the next week. And that is all for us today. Thank you for listening. And of course, make an effing adjustment, right? Making an effing adjustment.
Just make an adjustment.
Talk to you. I will talk to you next week. Ep will talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.